How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, thank you for stopping by. My name's Dylan, and today we're going to be taking a look at Sygg River Guide. Sygg is a 2/2 for 2, specifically 1 white and a blue, who, for 1 generic mana and a white, gives target Merfolk protection from the color of your choice until end of turn. Sygg is a cheap and inexpensive commander whose ability protects himself as well as any other Merfolk on the table. He's in the colors made for control, and with the other Merfolk synergies in the game, he can definitely be turned into what some would call a beefy boy. With that being said, Sygg is a pretty casual commander. Now let's find some mean cards we can play with him. First off, let's knock the rocks out of the way with Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Mind Stone, Command Sphere, and Talisman of Progress. All of these are great rocks, 2 of which can be used for card draw later in the game, and having access to more of our colors never hurts here. And if push comes to shove, we have Archaeomancer's Map, which lets us search for 2 planes, not basic planes, 2 planes, and lets us put a land from our hand into play whenever one of our opponents does so. What makes this even scarier is the fact that we don't have to bring those lands into play tapped. And what's scarier than an opponent with Burgeoning 2.0 on the battlefield? The Azorius player with open mana. On the topic of the Azorius player being scary with open mana, let's give our opponents a reason to fear us with some interaction. While counters such as Mana Leak and Mana Tithe aren't the best, they're pretty annoying to go up against, making our opponent's explosive turn a bit less spicy. Negate, Counterspell, and Annul are some pretty good counters as well. While Annul is very specific in terms of what it can counter, after seeing someone Spellburst to Cultivate, I believe a turn 1 Soul Ring be countered would also be a fun play. Or you could just say no to your opponent's Omniscience. While we're talking about instant speed interaction, let's talk about removal. Path to Exile, Swords to Plowshare, and Pongify are all great 1 mana removal spells. Reality Shift lets you exile a target creature for 2 mana and its controller manifests the top card of their library, so no Ulamog's or Avacyn for you. And while Mystic Reflection doesn't kill a creature, it turns it into something that isn't legendary. So if someone decides to play their commander, you can give them one of our Merfolk instead. Speaking of, let's get into our Merfolk synergies. First off, we got Coralheim Commander, Deep Channel Mentor, and Drowner of Secrets. Coralheim Commander costs 2 blue mana and gives us a 2/2. We can also level him up for 1 generic mana, and once we get him up to level 4, our Merfolk get +1/+1. Deep Channel Mentor costs 6 mana and gives our blue creatures unblockable, and Drowner of Secrets lets us mill a player for 1 by simply tapping our Merfolk we control. With this ability, because there isn't a tap symbol, you're able to activate this ability even if the Merfolk enter the battlefield this turn. This is also part of a 3-card combo that we'll get into later. Up next, we got Judge of Currents, Kopala Warden of Waves, Lord of Atlantis, and Master of the Pearl Trident. Judge of Currents lets us gain a life whenever a Merfolk of ours becomes tapped. Kopala essentially gives our Merfolk Ward 2. Lord of Atlantis and Master of the Pearl Trident both give our Merfolk +1/+1 and Island Walk. A little bit of redundancy, never hurt anyone. Now, we can't not have card draw in this deck, and if there's one thing Merfolk are good at, it's looting. Okay, so I lied, there's only one Merfolk in here that loots, and that'd be Merfolk Looter, who, for tapping it, lets us draw and discard. Seafolk Oracle and Biden of Thassa let us draw a card for each Merfolk that deals damage to a player, which will certainly be happening given Sygg's ability. Of course, we can't talk about Tribal card draw without mentioning Kindred Discovery and Vanquisher's Banner. Vanquisher's Banner lets us draw a card each time we cast a Merfolk spell, and Kindred Discovery lets us draw whenever a Merfolk enters the battlefield under our control. Now, even though this is a Merfolk deck, we need a bit more support. To start us off, Icon of Ancestry buffs our Merfolk. I'm noticing a theme here. Herald's Horn lets us put a Merfolk card in our hand at the beginning of our upkeep, and Merrill Commerce opens up for some blockers after going full swing. To help us even further with creatures untapping, Intruder Alarm keeps creatures from untapping during their controller's untap step, and instead untaps all creatures whenever another creature enters the battlefield. Straying a little off topic now, let's explain that loop I mentioned earlier. Drowner of Secrets lets us tap a Merfolk to mill a player for 1. Stony Brook Schoolmaster creates a Merfolk token whenever it becomes tapped, and Intruder Alarm untaps all creatures whenever another creature enters the battlefield. So, we tap the Schoolmaster to the Drowner's ability, it creates a creature, Intruder Alarm sees the creature come into play, we untap the Schoolmaster, and we're able to do this process on a loop and mill our opponents out while also creating an army of Merfolk at our disposal. So in the event one of our opponents decides to put an Ulamog in their deck, we have an infinite number of Merfolk at our disposal. And if we want to, we can also mill ourself out and cast Thassa's Oracle to outright win the game. A few more creatures we include in the deck include Grand Arbiter, Elvish Norn, Halvar, 8.5 Tails, and Piersteel Paladin. Grand Arbiter and Elvish Norn allow us to play the Fun Police for our opponents, while 8.5 Tails continues the theme of protection from a color our commander gives us, just being limited to white. Halvar gives our equipped creatures double strike, and at the beginning of combat lets us equip something to our commander for free. On the topic of free equipping cost, Piersteel Paladin turns all equipping costs to 0. You heard that right, folks. We're going to be suiting up and beating our opponents down with our commander. or other Merfolk, though it's probably going to be best to do our commander. First up, we got Stoneforge Masterwork, Coat of Arms, Argentum Armor, and Blackblade Reforged. Stoneforge Masterwork and Coat of Arms give our commander +1/+1 for each creature who shares a type with it, and Coat of Arms doesn't stop with just the commander. Coat of Arms gives our entire board +1/+1 for each other Merfolk we control, taking us back to the good old-fashioned beatdown. Argentum Armor lets us blow up a permanent on attack our opponent's control and buffs our commander by 6. And Blackblade Reforged gives our commander +1/+1 for each land we control, which is especially good mid-game. Continuing the theme of equipment, we got the Swords of Fire and Ice, Body and Mind, as well as Truth and Justice. Each of these have a combat damage trigger, which is almost always going to go off because of Sygg's ability. Sword of Body and Mind protects us from green and blue, and when it deals damage, creates a 2/2 wolf token, as well as mill our opponent for 10. Fire and Ice gives us pro red and blue. When it deals combat damage, we get to deal 2 damage to any target, as well as draw a card. Lastly, Sword of Truth and Justice gives us pro white and blue, and continues the theme of being able to beef up our commander even further by giving him a 1/1 counter and proliferating. With that, let's assess the power level of our deck. There's one tutor in the deck coming in the form of Sea Hunter, and there are 3 things to be aware of. 1, we can't use it for a whole turn. 2, it does allow us to cheat stuff onto the battlefield. However, 3, what he can get is limited to Merfolk. With that said, starting from 10, let's dock a point due to the fact that he can die within that 1 turn, and being limited to Merfolk is also kind of a downside. Next to think of is there are 2 total board wipes in the deck and 11 total pieces of instant speed interaction, whether that be in the form of counters or killing a creature. Since there is a 12 to 13% chance of us drawing into any of those, let's add a point. Next up, Elish Norn and Grand Arbiter are both stacks pieces for our opponents, and in lower level play, you don't see much of those. The counter argument though is that there's only 2 in the deck. Considering both of these points, we can leave our score as is. There is a 3-card combo in here that doesn't actually guarantee us the win, regardless how we use it. We can mill our opponents out, but one can't be running an Ulamog and prevent us from doing so. We can mill ourselves and cast Thassa's Oracle, but we'd need a counter magic for this to work. If the Oracle is countered, we can't get her back. Our loop is also pretty fragile too, so while this could win us the game, let's dock a point. Last thing to consider is our main win con, is commander damage. And since we can't win the game within the first 3 turns, we dock 3 points, bringing this deck to what I believe to be a 6. Anyway, that's all I got for y'all today. Thank you for stopping by. If you're new here and you liked what you saw, maybe consider subscribing? Or don't, I can't tell you what to do. Anyway, let me get some shameless channel promotions out the way now. We do have a Discord server. I'll have the link to that in the description. We also have a TCG player affiliate link. If you'd like to use that to purchase singles and help the channel out, it would mean a lot. We also have the complete deck list in the description if you'd be interested in purchasing, or if you'd like to make some slight modifications to it, it's all good. And finally, if you made it this far, I would just like to thank you for all your support. With that, I say thank you for stopping by. I'm Dylan, and I'll see you next time.